Hello, my name is Father Gregory Pine, and I am a Dominican friar of the province of St. Joseph, and this is Pints with Aquinas. In this episode, I thought we could address ourselves to swearing. So you might call it cussing or cursing or using foul language. I know somebody who refers to it as using rosy language, which is kind of precious and cute. But regardless of which, it's something that I think is kind of hard to think well about because it's not as life-threatening as some sins, and yet it can still kind of undermine our spiritual lives in small and subtle ways. So let's think about it together. So I think for a lot of people, there's an initial discovery of swearing. Maybe at a young age, you find that there are certain words which are not permitted, and maybe you are made to eat a small dot of palmolive on your tongue in order to discourage the practice of using those words. And certainly like in grade school, you might find friends using it and be somewhat enthralled by the prospect of saying these words which have such a cachet. But, later on in life, you have to determine the place that they occupy in your life. And this is my commendation of the practice of rooting them out wholly and entirely. So there's a kind of theological setting for thinking about this question, and I think it's good to envision it in light of the function of speech. So we are not robots who are made for the praise of God in a kind of automatic way. But that being said, we do have a great gift, or we do have a great responsibility in our faculty of speech. So there are many reasons for which we would exercise our faculty of speech, but it's typically thought of as something that exists for a social good. It's a way in which we share our interior life with those with whom we live. So it's a way in which we make the Word incarnate. It's a way in which our thoughts, our hopes, our dreams are given expression and are made the object of a common discourse. So you might use your faculty of speech for truth-telling, for encouragement, for correction, for the expression of gratitude. You might use it for praise, for worship, for edification, whatever it might be. But ultimately, it's for a kind of exchange between yourself and God, family, friends, coworkers, whomever. So there's a sense that we have a kind of sacred trust in that alone among embodied creatures, we have a capacity to express ourselves with a kind of precision, with a kind of accuracy, with a kind of force, and with a kind of elegance too. So yes, do dolphins kind of talk to each other? Sure. But our faculty of speech is something estimable, something far more exalted than that of dolphins. So why then might we steer clear of crass words? I think in order to address ourselves to this question, we have to acknowledge first the fact that crass words or cuss words, they feel good to say. And it's for this reason that people often say them. If you think about it just on a kind of basic level, there's a sonic quality or a sonic character to crass words, which just feels good in the mouth. These words are explosive, they're powerful, forceful. They're able to kind of command attention or command a certain respect, or at least they may be able to in certain settings. And they tend, as a result, to be hard-hitting, right? They're able to express our emotions. They're able to express our passions in a way that's pointed and in a way that gives an instant release. So another thing that we observe with these words is that they describe human experiences which are pretty basic or instinctual. So a lot of crass words focus around the bedroom and the bathroom. So they're describing human situations or human realities which are often very vulnerable, which are often very visceral, and they're using those things to just kind of describe whatever, frustration or anger or exasperation, however you want to describe it. But I think that in light of that fact, there are reasons for which to draw back from the use of crass words. And I don't want to be overly puritanical in this. This is not the most important sin, okay? These are not sins against faith. These are not sins against charity. They're kind of low-level sins against a certain justice, which is to say, against the way in which our faculty of speech ought to be exercised in the context of the life of the human community. But still, should we have a tolerance for any type of sin? No. Albeit with a certain patience, given the fact that we are on the way and not yet on the end, that we are a pilgrim people and we can't expect of ourselves to be perfect yesterday. But we shouldn't permit a kind of tolerance to creep in around the edges of our Christian life, which carves out a place for things that are less than excellent, for things that are less than perfect. When it comes to swear words, I think we often observe the fact that it's hard to moderate our use of them. It's like a kind of all or nothing type thing. Because if you start to use them, you find it easier and easier to use them. And you might be like, well, I don't know how much that's true. Well, then think about, like the last time you had a few beers and then tried to hem in your use of swear words. It gets harder. Like when you drop your defenses or when you drop your inhibitions, it becomes easier to say them. And then you find yourself in somewhat regrettable circumstances. Another thing that I think is true, when you use swear words, it tends to drop the level of discourse. You might be talking about a thing up here, and then you introduce swear words, and it has a way of kind of lowering it down here. And when you use swear words, it often is an invitation to other sins of speech. So you're chatting with somebody, they use a swear word. I think in that setting, it becomes easier to fall into the trap of sins that we described in an earlier video, like reviling, what's sometimes called calumny, or the sin of detraction, or the sin of derision. Because once your faculty of speech has been deployed in the use of the less than excellent, then it just becomes easier to slide in that direction. And I think, too, it's good to be cognizant of the fact that it debases the things that transpire in the bedroom and the bathroom. Like, do we have to think about the bathroom as this place, like a holy sanctum? No. But I don't think that we want to find ourselves constantly, like, not ridiculing, but exposing to a perverse pleasure those aspects of our human life which are most sensitive. Because I think that we should approach them not with like a fear and trembling, but with a certain respect, right? With a certain dignity. And that's very much the case when it comes to the bedroom. And I think this is part of the whole project of St. John Paul II's Theology of the Body, is to restore an appreciation for sexual intercourse and for family life more broadly. So when it comes then to thinking about the ultimate context for our use of the faculty of speech, we want it to be a sanctified use. We think here about the book of James, which talks about our which talk about our tongues like a kind of rudder of a ship, or like a kind of fire which burns in our very mouths. We want to use that faculty for, the glory of God and the salvation of souls in all of its, differentiated and subtle ways. And so to simply say, like, I can get away with this, it introduces a kind of laxity, or it introduces a kind of lack of vigilance into our practice of speech, which I think we want to root out to the extent that we can by God's grace. We want to replace it, in fact, with its inverse, or with its opposite, with its contrary, which is a practice of recollection, right? Which is a kind of ongoing conversation with God and with others about the things that matter most. It was said of St. Dominic that he always talked with God or about God. Cum Deo vel de Deo. And we want that to be said of ourselves too. Again, not in an uber pious kind of like put me on the cover of a 19th century book of French piety sense, but with a set, speak clearly, Father Gregory, with a sense that what we do, what we think, what we love, what we choose, what we say matters, and that it's capable of bearing a kind of sanctity, that it's capable of making this present evil age a yet more glorious version of itself. So when it comes then to sins of speech of this sort, I don't think that we can so much like root them out as we can kind of crowd them out. So we fill our mouths with the praise of God and with the edification of our brothers and sisters, and then we come to discover in turn that there's just not as much room for things that are less than excellent. And in the process, I think that we'll have to find the words to express the things, because crass words are often second best. There are better ways in which to describe and to communicate our experience, and we want to be about that business of finding the word to say the thing, of calling each thing by its right name. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. This is Ponce with Aquinas. If you haven't yet, please do subscribe to the channel, push the bell, and get updates on things that will come forth from these sweet, wise fonts in future days, weeks, months, years. And if you haven't yet, please do check out, what is the name of the podcast? Godsplaining, which is a podcast to which I contribute with 4 other Dominican friars. We also have some retreats coming up this summer in July and August, to which you are cordially invited. And you can find the details about those retreats at godsplaining.org. And lastly, I just wrote a book about prudence, which actually touches on some of these themes at greater length. It's called Prudence, Choose Confidently, Live Boldly. It's available in Kindle and paperback versions wherever books are sold. So check it out, profit from it, and I hope that you like it. So yeah, that's it. My prayers are for you. Please pray for me, and I will catch you next time on Pints with Aquinas.